Hey folks, Campbell here for the month of Copilots. Before I get going, I want to thank Kevin and Zoe for the invitation. And today I'm going to chat about understanding Microsoft Copilot for security. And that is not Security Copilot, that is Copilot for security. And we're going to cover the fundamentals because this is a new tool. Want to make sure you understand basic principles, things like what does it cover, licensing, costs, all that kind of stuff. We'll get into demonstration. We'll set it up from scratch so you're aware of the full process and then how you can prompt it against all the different services. And then lastly, at the risk of sounding a little bit condescending, folks in cybersecurity are pretty good at knowing what to think, less good at knowing how to think. So I want to go back to basics and I want to explain the process of how you can evaluate Copilot for security or really any other cybersecurity tool to know, is it right for you? Let's get going. Get the obligatory self-promotion out the way first, right? So I've been in IT for over a decade now. I've been awarded the Microsoft MVP Award in the security category. And I'm also the author of a book called Mastering Microsoft 365 Defender. Co-authored that with Victor Hedberg out of Sweden. Of course, Microsoft 365 Defender was renamed Defender XDR really soon after we released that book. So, that's a joke that just writes itself. I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor. So I got a couple of videos coming out, a couple of courses coming out on Microsoft Defender. So check those out. Every month, my friend William Franslett and I, we also organize the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance user group. So we try and get a couple of speakers every month to tell folks what kind of cool projects they've been working on, upskill, share the knowledge, all that good stuff. And then in the day job, I lead a professional services practice consultancy at Threatscape. So we get involved in all sorts of projects to do with Microsoft security, compliance, identity, and management. Alrighty, let's talk about some fundamentals of Copilot for security. So you know what this is all about. Copilot for security, when it refers to the thing called security, it's really referring to security as a whole, right? Across a lot of products and platforms within the Microsoft cloud ecosystem that folks often don't even look at as being security products. So what do I mean by that? Well, we've got Defender XDR, right? So that's endpoint, Office 365, cloud apps, identity, things like that. And also Sentinel now. So it acts as a co-pilot for that. It can do incident summarization and help you respond to some threats and alerts. That also extends to Defender External Attack Surface Management, which is an Azure resource all about kind of finding out publicly available data about your attack surface. Also covers Entra, which really is a security tool, right? Because what's the point in an identity and access management tool if we don't care about security? So covers Entra, or at least specific parts of Entra. Covers Microsoft Intune, which again, a lot of folks don't consider it a security tool, but if we think about Microsoft security kind of at an organizational level, it falls under that. And then also Purview, right? So that's the kind of the compliance or the data security side of things. When you get Copilot for security, you also get something called Defender Threat Intelligence, or MDTI. That's all about kind of upskilling and making you aware of threat actors, the types of attacks that they use, so that you can understand what's out there and how to defend against it. Also get things like indicators of compromise. And then we can extend a lot of that with plugins. So we'll talk more about plugins as we go, and I'll try and kind of demonstrate what that looks like in the demo. But plugins allow you to extend out-the-box capabilities either through third parties, through communities, or through Microsoft themselves. Let's talk about use cases. This is a quote from the Microsoft documentation, and it really explains where this product sits in the market. I'll read it out. Copilot for security helps support security professionals in end-to-end scenarios, such as incident response, threat hunting, intelligence gathering, and posture management. So let's break that down. Incident response and threat hunting, they're kind of more, if you think of the NIST cybersecurity framework, they're kind of what you call right of bang, where they're after the bad thing has happened. We want to control it, find who's done this, find what they've done, weed them out. Intelligence gathering, somewhere in the middle, right? That leans into that MDTI that we mentioned earlier. And then also posture management, that's far further left of bang, right? So posture management, frankly, is something that you don't even have to be a security professional to care about, right? You could be an end user compute, you could be a jack of all sysadmin. Posture management is really just about making sure your architecture's sound, you've got good kind of high levels of security at the configuration level, right? Rather than the response level. So again, end-to-end scenarios is what Copilot for Security is trying to achieve here. What I found, and probably what you'll see in the demo, is that the key use case is that right of bang scenario, right? So it's investigating security incidents. That's what this thing is best at. And when we get into the demo, you will see that. Let's talk about capabilities. So we know the kind of the scope of it, right? What areas of Microsoft Cloud Security we're focusing on. Now let's talk about what it can actually do in those. I'm not going to talk down to you about, the general principles of what Copilots are, right? Generative AI across all your services, blah, 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 blah. But in terms of how you actually use that Gen AI experience, you can either use it standalone in a dedicated Copilot for Security portal where you can prompt it and it's almost like a kind of chatbot. Or you could use an embedded experience, and that's where you go to your existing portals, like the security portal, the Entra portal, the Intune portal, and it will show up as an experience within those, usually on the right-hand side. Other capabilities it's got, as well as that kind of more general things like tell me XYZ, is specifically it can do script interpretation. So if you've got an obfuscated script that might be risky or suspicious and you want to investigate that, or just a script that is doing all sorts of crazy stuff and you don't have time to decipher that, you could give it this script and say, hey, in natural language, tell me what is this thing doing. You can also upload organizational content, so refer to knowledge bases and actual specific files so that you could then use those in your prompts. So for example, you might want to say something like, based on my organization's terms of use, or based on this document in my organization, tell me more about blah, blah, blah. We also got a concept called prompt books, which is almost like a predetermined list of prompts that you want to run against something. So for example, if you've got an incident where user looks like they've been compromised, if you've got a big SOC, big group of security responders who are having to deal with this stuff all the time, well, rather than having to get them to remember, oh, I should ask it this prompt and the next prompt and the next prompt, you can put those in a prompt book and it will be able to run those automatically. Plugins, spoke a little bit about this earlier. This is that extensibility capability, right, where we can lean to the community to build stuff for us. We can lean to third parties or even Microsoft to enhance Copilot for Security. One of those, it's not really a plugin, but it's just a type of capability we've got there, is it says log app in the slide, logic apps. So for example, if we want to automate things, we could automate into prompts. Price model. Here we go, hey? Right. Copilot for Security introduces a concept called the SCU, or the Security Compute Unit. And SCUs are really how you pay for this thing, and then also how it monitors your consumption. So what I mean by that is you provision SCUs as an Azure resource, not a million miles away from how you'd provision something like a virtual machine, right? So the SCU, in my mind, and when I talk to folks about this, I kind of describe it as a really abstraction away from that compute resource that is required to run your prompts, give you responses. So that's what you can think of that as. It's like a resource that you burn through. So it's in Azure, you license it through Azure, and because it's Azure, you can scale up and down. Again, if I make a crude comparison to virtual machines, we can change the size of a virtual machine in Azure. We can start off with something measly and then beef up if we need to, and vice versa, scale back down if we don't need all that power. You can do that with SCUs. So for example, I could maybe start with one secure compute unit to kick the tires on this thing. And that's something I recommend everybody does, is just start small, test it out, see what you think. Or you could then scale up, right? And you could buy more SCUs. So if I am throwing loads and loads of prompts at this thing, I may need more SCUs than if I'm only using it a little bit. Unfortunately, built in to the system at the minute, there's no way to completely deprovision it. So like with the virtual machine comparisons, with a VM, I can deallocate it and save cost of that VM running. The way that Copilot for Security has been developed is it currently doesn't really have that concept unless you completely delete your reservation. And if you delete your reservation, then that means you've only got, I want to say about 90 days, don't quote me on that, of time at which you will hold your data. And then after that, you might lose that data. So you can go all the way down to zero. You actually got to delete the resource. And there's no native way to do it, right? So you would have to go back into Azure and re-provision it. There's some community tools that folks like MVPs have put together to try and automate that a little bit, but there's no native solution for that. And so really the way that this product has been delivered to the market is that this thing should be running at least one SCU 24/7. So on that point, costing at the minute is $4 per secure compute unit per hour. And in terms of the recommendations for how many of these you should have, this is a quote from the Microsoft documentation. Microsoft recommends provisioning 3 SCUs per hour to start your Copilot for Security exploration. So I'm going to do the maths for you. And if we take 3 SCUs, we say that's going to cost us $4 per hour. 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year. We're looking at over $100,000, at least based on that kind of extrapolation. That's a lot of money. And that's why after we do the demonstration, which we're about to get into, I'm going to talk to you about assessing Copilot for Security and making sure that if you're going to spend that amount of money, or at least something close to it, right? Because you don't have to use 3 SCUs. You don't have to have it running 24/7. But if you're going to be buying any new type of cybersecurity service, I really want to talk to you about how to think about, is it the right thing that you should be spending your time on? All right, so those are our fundamentals about Copilot for Security. What we're going to do now is we're going to dig into a demo. We'll provision it from scratch. We'll throw some prompts at it so you can get a feel for how this thing works. All right, we're going to start over here at securitycopilot.microsoft.com. This is going to take us through a kind of provisioning wizard. I'm going to choose my Azure subscription because, again, that's how this is built as an Azure resource. We're going to create a new resource group. I'll call this month of Copilots. Capacity name, let's just say month of Copilots 01. I'm based in the UK, so let's head there. I'm going to choose this option purely for demonstration purposes, but I imagine a lot of folks in production won't choose this. This basically means if the demand in the region that you've just chosen for prompt evaluation is too high, it can use other regions. I'm going to choose that. Here we get to our actual SCU consumption. You can see here 1 SCU is estimated to cost, if it's ticking away 24/7, just shy of $3,000 per month. I kind of want enough power here for the demonstration, so I'm going to bump that up to 5 security compute units, and it gives me an estimated monthly cost of roughly $14,500 per month. I'm going to acknowledge the terms and conditions, and we're going to hit continue to fire away. And what this does is this provisions those as Azure resources. So over in the Azure portal now, I would start to see the resource group, and I would also start to see that SCU as a compute resource, and it would be billed in however way that subscription is normally billed. So pay as you go, etc., etc. So we're going to let that provision. All right, confirming that we're going to be stored in the UK based on where my tenant is. We'll hit continue. You can choose whether or not Microsoft's going to, get your data, etc., etc. I'm just doing demo environment, so I'm going to allow that. Continue. This is where we get into the kind of limited RBAC model that Copilot for Security has. You'll see by default that everyone has contributor permissions. And what that means is it will use an account's existing permissions and layer Copilot for Security on top of those. So for example, if I am a security administrator, I can now use Copilot for Security to get results that would be limited by that normal set of permissions. So I could use it in the Defender portal, the Entra portal, Purview portal, etc., etc. However, if I'm not a security admin, maybe I've just got no particular Entra ID roles. Even though it says here everyone, I am going to be limited by my other permissions. You'll also see owners down here, and they can do things like control other role assignments. It could be worth you going in and editing that to whatever you want. So for example, because everyone has contributor, that means everyone can use these security compute units, which could mean very quickly you run out of capacity, right? If that's not well governed. So something to keep in mind. We're going to hit continue here. And we're good to go. Gives me my subscription, all that details that I punched in earlier. And again, it confirms this portal link. This is our dedicated experience, right? So this is one portal. All we really get to do in this portal is Copilot for Security. We'll hit finish here. And I'm going to do a very quick tour here so we get some documentation and training that we can use. If I open the menu on the left here, if I head to role assignment, that's where I can customize those RBAC roles. So for example, you'll see the account that I used to provision this shows up. And similarly, I get other contributor roles, including everyone. So I could go away and remove that. And that means that only these roles are going to be able to actually use Copilot for Security. Usage monitoring is an interesting page. I don't find it particularly clear where your use monitoring, that kind of boundary between what will show in usage monitoring versus what you're billed for. We'll maybe come back here later on, but what you'll see is you'll see little bar charts, and they will say, in the hour of 8 till 9, you used this many security compute units. In the hour of 9 till 10, you used this many security compute units. So it lets you kind of understand the actual compute power that you're using. Prompt book library, spoke about prompt books earlier. Those are where we can build up kind of automated queries that will just keep running. Let's head to home. And let's just get going. So I ran Copilot for Security quite extensively when I was doing my initial testing and had mixed results. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to see, since my initial testing, which I blogged about back in what would now be April 2024, let's try some queries and see how those queries, which maybe didn't perform so well back then, let's see how they perform now, hopefully with improvements over time. So, I do a lot of, I think of NIST cybersecurity framework. I'm kind of in the identify and protect region, left the bang. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for some security posture management questions. So let's say, and Entra ID, how many of my users have FIDO2 security key? Punch that in. The query is going to run. You will get these little daily tips, as you can see up the top here. This one's just telling me to try different prompt styles, which I guess is a good tip. Pardon me. Some of the tips are quite funny. The very first tip I ever seen told me that Copilot can fabricate things and that you should verify everything it says, which is kind of funny. It's true, large language models by definition, they cannot distinguish between true and false. So you do have to fact check everything this thing tells us. So this is the same output I kind of got before. So yeah, it was able to choose Microsoft Entra for the data source, but then it wasn't able to process it due to invalid or insufficient input. So it can't really still reason over authentication methods. All right, well, let's try something that I am reasonably confident should be in the scope of Copilot for security. Let's say, can you tell me if I have any users at risk or risky sign-ins as determined by Entra ID protection? If I do, tell me the details. So Entra ID protection is one of those capabilities that is kind of explicitly supported by Copilot for security. And as that's running, what you'll see is the first thing that Copilot for security tries to do is look at my prompt, and then based on my prompt, identify the appropriate service / plugin for that. So for example, if I was using third-party plugins, it would lean on those to get the data. All right. Okay, cool. So I get no users at risk or risky sign-in, which is accurate. Cool. And it was able to confirm that. That's fine. All right. Well, let's shift over a little bit. I know I got some incident / alerts in the Defender XDR portal, so let's try those. What alerts and incidents do I have in Defender XDR? Please prioritize these for me. Pretty reasonable prompt. You know, again, one of the kind of explicitly described use cases of Copilot for security is speeding up / supplementing security operations centers. So, you know, they're looking at, they're crawling through alerts, they're crawling through incidences, and one of the things that can burden SOCs is prioritization, right? How do I know, where do I start? How do I dig through all that noise? So you can see here again, it's chosen Microsoft XDR. And let's see what our response is. We're getting some results here. Okay, so I know that this is a demo tenant, so it's really not that noisy, not a whole bunch of stuff. I think I've only got 1 or 2 incidents anyway. So yeah, here we go. And Copilot for security is telling me about those 2 incidents that I've got in my demo tenant, gives me a little bit of details about them, gives me links over to them. In terms of the priority, let's see how it's done that. So 2 incidents, the severity of the incidents can help prioritize the incidents. Incident 2 is high severity and is still active, so it should be prioritized. And the other one's information should be resolved. Okay, not bad, quite useful. All right, let's again shift a little bit over to the left, and what we're going to ask is, based on, well, I'll tell you what, do any of my devices in Intune have vulnerabilities based on Defender vulnerability management? So Defender vulnerability management capability that can be licensed standalone, also as part of Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. What I'm trying to do here is see how well does it reason over the data in 2 different sources, right? So I've got a bunch of devices in Intune, a bunch of devices in Defender. Defender is going to query, you know, it can crawl through CVEs and figure out what is vulnerable. But I'm actually interested in the Intune side of those devices. So let's see how it performs there. Okay, so it's chosen natural language to KQL for Microsoft Defender XDR. Let's see how this goes. So it's processing the request. We're coming in just over 30 seconds now. We're getting a response. All right, so I got a few devices in Intune with vulnerabilities. Give me the details of those devices. Tells me the details of their vulnerabilities. Great, and it even gives me a little bit of KQL that I can use to get that data. And sure enough, if I look up at the kind of the columns here, those matches the columns that were prompting in that KQL. The total number of rows in the data is 136. Right, so it's not it's telling me every vulnerability that's on every device there. I have to be honest, I ran that query or similar query in the past and the result was not as good. So that's an improvement there. Quite happy with that. So let's again focus on this kind of preventative security. So based on my, I'll tell you what, I got a copy of this prompt rather than typing it out. I'm just going to copy that over. Here we go. So we mentioned earlier that Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence is licensed as part of Copilot for security. So let's find out what it thinks the main risks to my tenants might be. So MDTI is kind of looking at threat intelligence out there, threat actors, common campaigns. I want to find out, well, based on the real world data about what's happening out there, how is my tenant potentially at risk for these because I maybe don't have mitigations in place? So let's fire that prompt in and we'll see what our results are. So again, I'm going to check through those plugins. And we'll see how we get on here. Again, I have had mixed results with this exact prompt before. And so this is a good way of me kind of, again, just testing how has this improved since launch, since I last tried these prompts. Yep, cool. So it's using MDTI. You kind of expect that. So got some threat intelligence information, doing stuff created after the last week, based on when I'm recording this. Okay, there's one main risk identified for your tenant. Only one. Maybe it's just saying one main risk. Server-side template injection and crush FTP. All right. I'm not aware of actually having crush FTP installed anywhere. Yeah, so we can see here impacted assets 0 devices, vulnerable devices 0, but misconfigured devices 4. So again, misconfigured means there's maybe some kind of mitigating setting on that device, but the software itself might not be installed. So the best use of your time for defending against this main risk would be to prioritize patching. Okay, so it's maybe missing some Windows update or something. What we can actually do is we can click this link here. This will redirect us over to Defender XDR into the MDTI portal. Actually, I'll tell you what, this isn't the threat intelligence page. This is actually good old threat analytics, which you get with Defender for endpoint plan 2, never mind needing Copilot for security. And then sure enough, so if we just kind of, well, let's fact check this, right? Recommended actions. So it said that there was some things I could do. Yeah, here you go. So this is all basic standard stuff, right? There's nothing in here that's particularly important for my tenant, I would say. If I go to threats here, yeah, so I only got like 4 impacted devices across a lot of these impacted assets. Yeah, we're probably not going to have any because we're in a very quiet tenant here. But yeah, so I mean, you can kind of decide yourself, but it appears to me it's just kind of picking the number of misconfigured or vulnerable devices. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm not entirely sure how it's decided that particular one was the right one for me to focus on. When, for example, if I look at this one, you know, the active profile of another Tempest, it's got higher, but maybe it's because it's not looking at active profiles. Alrighty, tell you what, let's ask it. Can you further justify why this is the most important risk for me to look at? What about things like idea? So again, look, you know, if I'm honest, when I'm looking at most customers' tenants, I'm looking at misconfigurations, less on endpoints these days, a lot more on the identity side, where at least on endpoints, we've typically got something like an antivirus and EDR running, at least for a lot of my customers. But then over on the entry side of things, you know, there's a lot of conditional access gaps. I kind of expect a well-refined system to be able to point those out. But to be fair, maybe that's maybe it's not really capable of looking at Entra configuration based on threat analytics or MDTI. Let's see how it justifies this. It did earlier kind of recommend that I fact check things, so we'll see how that goes. Here we go. Okay, so kind of just give me the same thing. Pardon me, I'm laughing here, but I'm coughing. As for artificial intelligence threat management, okay, right. I did not know that was even a term. So it looks like it thinks, I'm thinking I'm talking about adversary in the middle, but it thinks I'm talking about AI threat protection management, which a very quick Bing search in a different window kind of tells me isn't really an initialism, but hey, cool, all right. Okay, so you kind of get the idea about how these prompts work. What I can do is I can also head over to, I'll tell you what, let's stay in here. You'll see here I can pin things, so if there's one that was particularly of interest to me that I'm maybe going to use a lot, I can do that. I can resubmit it if it fails. Now what I can also do, I'm going to try and remember this, hope I get this right. Let's say I take these two prompts here. What I can do is I can then choose to create a prompt book. So for example, let's say I'm responding to an incident and I'm like, you know what, those last 4 or 5 prompts that I asked, they were great and I could reuse them over and over again. We can select those prompts and then create a prompt book from there, and then we could run that prompt book rather than me having to remember to type out every single one. And I can add manual ones here as well. So you get the idea. Prompt books are designed to make you faster at using prompts in Copilot for security. So I'll tell you what, let's head over to usage monitoring. Let's see how we're doing so far. So yeah, you'll remember that I provision 5 units per hour. I haven't ran many prompts off the top of my head, certainly less than 10. In my head, probably near 5. And I'm already at 4.8, used 90% of my units. So yeah, that's the kind of consumption rate that we're looking at here. It keeps a record of my last sessions. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a little bit more digging about, see if I can go to settings. There we go, that's what I want. You can change into dark mode, which obviously will give you performance benefits. That's a joke, by the way, not a very good one. So you get the idea. This is the dedicated experience. Now what I'm going to try and do, I found that it can take a little bit of time to provision, but you can see those 2 incidents that I had from earlier. I'm going to try and refresh this. What we would normally expect, I need to go back. Yeah, here we go. This is what I want. So Copilot is now going to implement and be embedded in these other portals. So again, this is a nice quiet tenant. I'm going to go into that multi-stage instant. We're going to open that. And we get Copilot automatically popping up on the right-hand side here. Now, I haven't found a way to disable it automatically appearing. So if you don't want it there, either for yourself or for other users, really the only way is to remove their permissions through RBAC that I've discovered so far. But that's the idea. I'm going to wait for it to do its thing here. It's taking a little bit of time here, but you'll see up the top there, it says generating. Well, I was hoping it would generate a kind of summary of what is going on here. The theory is it basically contacts, or sorry, it generates plain language descriptions of your incident. Doesn't look like it's been able to do that, but let's just go down here. So it's basically giving me now a guided response. So if I'm a responder, what could I do about this alert, right? So what does it think? Let's have a read through this. So it's to contact the user on Teams and ask them to confirm their activity. little bit of background. What I actually did here was I was running a great script that you can get online. I just did a podcast about this with Kaido Giardi, and it's testing tamper protection on Defender for Endpoint. That's what we're actually looking at here. And it's basically saying contact the user and ask them if they were doing anything suspicious. Harmful software, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So yeah, I could copy that to a clipboard and then send it over Teams. That's the guided response it's giving me. I'm really more interested in this. Oh, here we go. I really want that plain English summarization, but due to my high usage, Copilot can't respond to requests. Let me try one more time. Nope, doesn't like that. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. This is incident number 2 in my tenant. So let's see if we can actually go back to Copilot for security and run it there. Embedded experience tell me that I'm kind of out of my consumption limits. Let's see how on over here. In the past, I've had it where this portal won't tell me that I've hit my limit, and it just spins like this for a long, long time. And then I have to kind of leave it a while, come back, and then it will tell me that I've hit my limits. Kind of looking like the same thing here, right? Let's head back to the home page. We'll go down to prompts. Can you summarize Defender incident number 2 for me? Here we go. So we've hit our high usage. Oh boy, right. I mean, so look, I'm going to take out these incident summaries. They don't count because they didn't work. Yeah, let's, so it keeps the history of my sessions, right? I'm going to go into this one here. How many prompts did we run? We ran, will this tell me if I click that? Maybe if I then go to create a prompt book, or do I have to count them myself? Here we go. So 6 prompts. 6 prompts and responses. If I now head to my usage monitoring, that's taking me over 5.3 and I can't do anything more. 6 prompts, like what, less than half an hour. 5.3 usage consumption. Let's head over to Azure. How much would that cost us? Let's go into my, every time I head in here, I get lost. Here we go, resource groups, my Copilot resource group that was provisioned automatically. And here's the type here. So this is compute capacity. We're going to go into update security compute units. And here you go. Right, yeah, so look, if you had a 24/7 operation, like a SOC who were constantly responding to threats, and you wanted to do what I just did, which, let's call a spade, not particularly impressive, not particularly demanding. I got, how many did we say? I think I got 6 prompts or something like that. In an hour, I've already ran out, and that would cost me $14,400 per month. So I would probably need at least double that if we say that I had half an hour worth of work. Yeah, so that's coming in at 28,800. Point is, you have to be really, really careful of your cost management here. And speaking plainly, I do have a question about, is this the right model? My own personal opinion is if we could provision this on demand, I think there'd be a lot more use cases. What I mean by that is, at the minute, if I try to go down to 0 security compute units, you'll see here I actually can't. I have to have a minimum of 1 security compute unit running 24/7. So that's going to be my minimum cost. And I'll tell you what, if I do the very advanced thing of bringing up Microsoft Calculator here, let's do 2880 because I don't have the brain power for that. Here we go. So we're talking at a minimum based on this model, that's kind of the out-the-box model of $34,500 per year. But again, you've seen how, I hit 5 security compute units with 6 prompts. 1 security compute unit per hour is just not useful. If I did want to run this on demand, maybe I'm not 24/7, maybe I'm 9 till 5, and I just want to dip in and out of this. Like I said, can't go down to 0. What we would have to do is we would have to delete the resource. So we'd have to head here, and we'd have to choose delete. Now, there are some really cool community tools out there that have been developed. Some MVPs who are smarter than me have provisioned automatic tooling where kind of through automation you can delete these and provision these on demand to kind of add on the ability to do on-demand provisioning, but it's not available out of the box. The only real risk that I found of deleting is that it can take a while for it then to become available again. I've had incidents where I'm waiting 15, 20 minutes after deleting and then re-adding to actually then be able to head over to the portal and then use it. If you're in a hurry to respond to a threat, that is not acceptable. The other risk is that you may have data loss, right? Don't quote me on this, but I believe it keeps that data for about 90 days, and then it would prune it back. So if I didn't, bump up my security compute once more. And hey, just back on the portal here, we can actually see it's still calling it Microsoft 365 Defender instead of Defender XDR, but that's a rant for a different day. All right, so listen, that's been our overview of the look and feel of Copilot for security. I think you can get an idea of my thoughts on this. Let's head back to the slides and wrap this up with some concluding thoughts. All right, now that you've seen this in action, let's conclude things. When Copilot for security first came out and in the weeks that followed, lots of folks would approach me and they'd say, so how is Copilot for security? Is it good? Should I get it? And that makes sense because folks ask the same question. They'll say, is Defender for Endpoint any good? They'll say, is Entra ID any good? These things are all relative. And I'm going to talk to you about how you can make these decisions yourself. Bottom line is when we are in cybersecurity, much like any other type of field, much like living your day-to-day life, the resources we have are limited. We get limited time, we get limited money, we get limited attention span, all that stuff. You can't have it all and you can't do it all. So really, the question about, well, is Copilot for security any good? That's just relative, right? That's relative to, based on all these constrained resources we've got, what else can we do with those constrained resources? So for the time it takes me to implement one tool, what other tools could I implement? For the money I spend on one tool, what other tools could I spend that money on? For the time it takes me to upskill in one tool, what are the other tools I could be upskilling in? And so fundamentally, what you have to look at when you look at anything to do with cybersecurity is what else can I achieve by investing similar resources? We've covered how with Copilot for security, you can get up and running really, really quick, right? You've seen it yourself when we did the demonstration that you don't need to go out and spend $100,000 up front, right? That might be the quoted or the average or the recommended annual spend, but you don't need to spend that. You can kick the tires on this thing at really low cost. So you should go away and do that as a follow-up action, right? Just understand how this might benefit me in my situation. One of the things that you'll experience in cybersecurity is that, well, the bottom line is folks love to sell you stuff in cybersecurity. Copilot for security is good in the sense that you can find out, well, does this actually meet my needs because of the reasons I just mentioned? It's low cost of entry to test it out. But you'll find still that, the MSSPs, the sales folks, they're going to be climbing all over you trying to sell you this thing. Just like they will try to sell you anything in cybersecurity, right? Doesn't matter if you've already got 70 tools, it's that 71st cybersecurity tool that's going to be your fairy dust. And that's what's really going to help you be secure. So, let's be real about things. Based on the resources I have, based on what I'm already doing, do I need another tool? Or do I need to get better at implementing and leveraging the tools I've already got? If I take the money that I was going to spend on tool 71, would I be better taking that money and spending it on maybe professional services that help me do a better job of tools 1 through 70? You can see where I'm going with this. And the other thought I really wanted to leave you with when we're thinking about, well, when I'm making purchasing decisions and I'm making strategy decisions about what do I go for, what do I do with cybersecurity in terms of the tooling, I want you to be really demanding on vendors. I want you to look at folks who are trying to sell you something and say, okay, you've told me that this thing can defend me at machine speed or whatever the latest marketing buzzword is. I want you to demand the details. I want you to make sure they are really, really specific about telling you how this will help you and the historic proof that it has helped others. So for example, if someone says this generative AI tool can, transform your business, say, well, specifically, how can it transform my business? How can it save me money? How can it make me better? And show me proof and examples of specific other environments where it's had that effect and how. The bottom line is a lot of sales pitches, they don't stand up to much scrutiny, right? And they don't stand up to you digging in there for the real details. And I just want you to keep that in mind. Generative AI, cybersecurity industry, they're full of a lot of really promising tools. And long term, I'm very optimistic for them. But in the short term, the onus is on you as the cybersecurity practitioner, the cybersecurity buyer, to make sure you're demanding the best out of your vendors and you're making those right purchasing decisions, because there's a lot of money on the line. All right, that's my concluding thoughts. And I'd just like to thank you for watching. Hopefully you stuck with it the whole time. This is a brand new capability and I just want to get everything out there, be as transparent with you as possible. If you want to hit me up, ask me any questions, you can find my social media details there. And then again, I just want to thank Zoe and Kevin for the invitation. They're doing some really cool stuff at the Copilot Connection, including their podcast, which I've appeared on, talking about Copilot security. So if you want to, you can check that out. And again, just thank you for viewing. Hopefully this has been informative for you.